Welcome to Gina's Goodies. Today in the workshop we're going to be making dye sublimated masks. This is an easy project and an excellent place to learn the basics of dye sublimation. First, the tools of the trade. To make this project you're going to need a heat press, a pressing pillow, an adhesive, either heat-resistant tape or spray. You'll need a pair of heat-resistant gloves. You'll need a sublimation printer that has ink and paper specifically made for sublimation. You'll need your masks that are made out of polyester. We'll explain why later. You'll also need tweezers or hemostats and a pair of scissors, as well, of course, as your design. For a list of suppliers we recommend, please see the end of the video. Now, on to the fun part. Let's make your mask.
In order to press a design onto a mask, you have to have a design. You can, of course, buy a design, but we're going to make our own. Step 1. Measure your mask. You need to measure your mask to determine the area available for your design. Different masks have different shapes and sizes, as you can see here. For this video, we'll be using this mask. As you can see, this mask has a white area available for design that's about 7 inches wide by about 5 inches tall, with corners that are a little bit shorter than the center of the mask. You want to make your design fit into that space. Step 2. Make your design space. We use Silhouette Studio as our graphic design tool, but if you're more comfortable in another program, feel free to use it. To start out, you want to create a box that is just a bit bigger than your mask, in this case 8 inches long by 5.5 inches wide. The next step is to fill the box with a design. Silhouette Studio allows you to use JPEG files as patterns. It's as simple as dropping them into the patterns folder, but we'll do that in an upcoming episode. So here's my rectangle, and it needs a fill. So I'm clicking on the fill panel on the right side of the software. It looks like a painter's palette, and going to the third tab, which is patterns. From there I choose a pattern and voila, it fills my entire rectangle. I could leave it like this, and that would be just fine, but I want to make a little statement. So I'm using words. I left-click once on the A on the left side of the screen, and again on the design field, so I could type out my words. I chose worry is a waste of imagination, and I put these words on 3 lines. Worry on the first, is a on the second, and waste of imagination on the third. From there, I centered the words and used the fill panel to turn them red. From here, I use the offset panel also on the right side of the software. It looks like a star with an outline. Offset puts a space around the words so they stand out a bit more clearly from the background. Choose offset and then apply. Once I clicked apply, I move the words away from the offset and cover the offset white using the fill panel. I then grouped them, moved the words back, and centered them together. I then selected them all and grouped. I then moved them all onto my rectangle and centered them within the rectangle and scaled to size. I then selected everything and grouped it. For the last part of this step, I right-clicked and chose Flipped horizontally, and everything flipped. When you're working with sublimation, it's important that when you print your design, you understand it prints backwards so that when it's printed and put on the garment, it's facing the correct way. Otherwise, everything will read backwards.
Okay, now that you've got your design done, it's time to print it out so you can press it. In Silhouette Studio, this is pretty straightforward. Your tool, if you use a different tool, your tool may change. But in Silhouette Studio, you go to File, and you go to Print. If you already have your paper settings set up the way you want, everything will look really good. And you can just hit Print from there. Make sure that you select your printer. Whether you use Sawgrass Print Manager or Sawgrass SG800 will depend upon how you set up your printer with your vendor when you purchased it. In our case, we want to be using Sawgrass SG800. Always check your preferences and make sure that it is what you want. In our case, we're printing this on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, which we have as tray 2 in our printer, and we want the high quality print. Sometimes it will default to high speed. Make sure you change that to high quality. Quality matters way more than speed when you're doing sublimation. Once that's set, also check to make sure you're on color. You should be, but check to make sure. Orientation, portrait versus landscape. If you notice on the print preview that your picture is off of the paper, you probably have a mistake on portrait versus landscape. Just try the other one, see if you like it. When it looks good, just say OK, and then print. When you run your printer dry, you'll get a message that the ink is low. Don't worry about that, unless it says it's out. It'll scroll through, and it will print out on your printer. Give that a couple minutes to come out. It will be slow because you're going for high quality. Once it's printed out, it's time to go to the press. First, you should turn on your heat press. Dye sublimation works at a temperature between about 360 degrees and 400 degrees. The exact time and temperature you're going to use for any one given product will vary. It should be supplied for you by your distributor. Even with that, you'll probably have to play a little bit and waste a couple pieces before you find the exact numbers that work best for your press and product. For these masks, we found that a temperature of 400 degrees and a time of 1 minute with a medium pressure works best. Set the press to your settings and let it work on getting to temperature while you prepare the stack. First, you need to detach your design to your mask. You can use a spray adhesive for this. We recommend heat tape instead. First, take a second and inspect your mask to make sure there isn't any lint or other issue with it, using a lint roller to clean it if necessary. Be careful if you've chosen a mask that isn't polyester on both sides to ensure that the polyester side is up. Generally, it's easiest to lay your design face up and then put the mask on top, taking care to center the design on the mask. Once you are happy with the design placement, affix it with a couple of pieces of heat tape. We recommend for the masks you put the tape on the bias tape edges of the mask, since sometimes if you put the tape on your actual design, a tape mark will end up showing in the final product. Now, it's time to go to the press. You can think of this as building a sandwich. The different layers have different purposes, but they all have their part to make the project go. We will start at the very bottom of the sandwich. At the very bottom, we always put a clean piece of butcher paper or other scrap paper. Sublimation ink works because it turns into vapor by the heat of the press. Those vapors can mess up your next project. That penny's worth of scrap paper is a small investment in quality work. You can reuse this piece over and over again until it gets too worn to use, or if it gets ink on it, you want to dispose of it. Next up is the pressing pillow. This is a piece of foam which is sewn into an envelope made of a Teflon sheet. The purpose of this is to equalize the pressure on the piece. Another piece of scratch paper goes on top of the pillow to protect it. This piece will likely only last through one pressing as it's here to excess ink. Next is your printed design on your mask. Note, you need to flip it over from how you built the stack, so the image is closest to the heat pattern over your mask. Finally, one more piece of scrap paper, again to catch excess ink. Once you have everything stacked, take a second. Make sure you are centered on the press, and that your press is set to the correct time and temperature, and that your mask is on your pressing pillow. You cannot undo a sublimation once you start. Take that second to be right the first time. Now it is time to engage your press. For our press, the platen swings into place and then locks down. A clamshell press will just swing down. Either will work perfectly fine. Once it's engaged, you are committed. You may notice some small amounts of smoke coming from the side of your press. That's okay. It's the sublimation ink sublimating into a gas and escaping. Don't worry, most of it's attaching to your mask successfully. During this minute, you'll want to put on your heat-proof gloves. Your mask will be exposed to 400 degrees and will be getting hot. Earlier, we mentioned that the mask had to be polyester. Why? Well, because the chemistry of sublimation only works if the ink comes into contact with a fiber that's at least 50% polyester, higher percentages being even better. The entire item doesn't have to be polyester, just the surface you want to print on. These masks, which are the SBL 300s from JDS Industry, are 2 layers of poly sandwiching a layer of cotton. You can print on either side. Something else to note, you cannot reuse a print once you've pressed it. Although you will still see the image after, most of the ink will have gassed away and attached to your mask. There isn't enough left for a second press. So, once your press gets to the end of the minute, it will beep. Lift the platen up in one fluid motion, swing it away if it's a swing away. Then you're going to want to go ahead and work quickly. Pull away that top piece of scrap paper, and then just in one fluid motion, grab your mask and peel it away. Then you're done. Take a look at your final result.
So, there you have it, one sublimated mask. The tools and materials we used for this project are available from these suppliers. Thanks for sticking with us during our first video. We hope this will be the first of many and you'll hang with us for what's to come. Thanks again from Gina's Goodies.